So the purpose of this video is to show you the difference between a main verb and an auxiliary verb. So here there are two sentences. I go home each day and I am going home. In the first example, there is one verb, I go home. But in the second example, there seems to be two verbs, I am going home, which really means that it's a verb phrase, what we would call a verb phrase. And we can tell that in that second example, the word going is the main verb. It holds most information about the action, and we've needed to add am to comply with the rules of grammar. And in this sense, am is considered to be an auxiliary verb, a helping verb. And so that's the main difference between the two. So if we were to code the verbs in these sentences, in the first sentence, go would simply be verb. And in the second sentence, going would be the verb and am would be the auxiliary. So when I classify these, I would write going as the main verb. I would actually just write a V next to it, and I would write AUX or auxiliary next to the auxiliary verb. So let's have a look at these examples. He prepares the dinner versus he is preparing the dinner. In this first example, you can see that there is one verb, prepares. In the second example, however, you can see that there is a verb phrase, is preparing. And preparing is the main verb, while is the auxiliary. In the second example, I give it to you, give is the main verb. I probably should say gave to make it a little more grammatically correct. I gave it to you, with gave being the main verb. In the second example, there is a verb phrase which links two parts together. Given represents the main idea, the main action in that sentence, so that is a verb. But was has been added to help indicate past tense, but it's also part of that verb in a verb phrase. So in this example, was is coded as auxiliary and given is coded as verb. In the example above, it's the same pattern. In the third example, I agree. Agree is the main verb. All right? Whereas in the second part, will agree is a verb phrase with two components. Agree is the main verb, and will, as in will agree, the will has been added for grammatical purposes. So it is the auxiliary, the small word that helps the main verb. So that's how you code auxiliaries and verbs. In this next part, I wanted to show you about modals, which are the other type of auxiliary. Modals are really what we use when we talk about the likelihood, the probability, or the degree of certainty that an action is about to happen. And I've given you a few examples here. Should, he should go, he might go, he must go, he could go, and the difference is he will go. And you can see I've put an X next to will go because will does not imply that there's any uncertainty that that thing will happen. So we usually just call that an auxiliary verb. So please don't get tripped up by that. Words like should, could, might, on the other hand, are considered modal auxiliaries. And so there's a fairly narrow group of words. So should, might, must, and could all help the main verb to go in these sentences. For the purposes of this class, you can just classify them as that main auxiliary type, but just bear in mind that there are two types of auxiliaries. There are auxiliary verbs that we discussed before, and modals that we're talking about now that really link to the probability that something is going to happen, but just code them as auxiliaries.